All right. Good evening, everybody. Happy Sunday. Thanks for tuning in. We've got another collector conversation evening for you, but we've changed some of the guests. As you can see, tonight's we've got Mellowin Lad Mikhail over there and George Hodge. They're replacing Khalil and James, who are taking some time off. And of course, we've got Dino and Wonder Effing Woman Jill with us this evening again. So thanks for joining the show for me. Again, this is fantastic. I'm glad to have some new faces.
Jill and I have the old guard, and like any superhero team, it's always rotating members. So we're welcoming, Mikhail and George to the fam, and glad to have them on board. So
yeah, we'll have some fun.
I hope it's more fun than the initiation for
amateur dueling dealers.
No, what's the Amazon show with the Superman?
Oh, okay.
I'm blanking on the name. It was very good.
The Boys. I don't know what it is. What is it? The Boys. Huh?
I mean, The Boys. There's the Seven.
The Boys. Oh, The Boys.
The Boys.
Yes. Got it. Yes. No, it's
so welcome to this very informed collector chat, guys.
No, glad to have you. And we do a shout out to kind of Khalil and James, who really started this whole thing and recruited Jill and I to be a part of that initial foursome. Hopefully they're sitting back with their feet up, enjoying the show, and we'll carry on without them. But they're here in spirit.
Exactly, and I should say, I might be so wiped out next Sunday that I might want to skip it. Just so you know, after the whole weekend of Comic Art Live and pretty much no night off from live streaming, I'll let everybody know by midweek if I don't feel I can do a Sunday night show on top of I have to moderate 3 panels that day too. But I will try. I think I can. So we'll see how it goes.
You deserve a night off if you need it. Comic Art Live is going to be big.
I think so.
I'm waiting for the 24/7 Bill Cox video feed.
You're going to be waiting a long time for that.
the Truman Show Cox feed.
Yes. Right. Exactly. Yes. No, we're not going to do that. But
and thanks to all those joining us today, and for all your emails. We got a whole bunch of good ideas and potential topics, and we chose a bunch of them for today's show. So hopefully that'll be kind of responding to what's important to everyone else out there. So,
and thanks, Ruben.
Yeah.
George wins for best. All right, fine.
I'll take it.
Well, with that, George, you get to start us off tonight on the topic. So you got the best hair. You get the first topic.
That's the official rule of this. All right, awesome. First off, thanks for having me on. Appreciate the invite. And I like to think I'm the Don Cheadle to Khalil's Terrence Howard in the recast for this week. But yeah, this week, this is more, I was hoping this would be more of a discussion with the group here and the folks in the chat as well. I feel like there's been a shift in the comic collecting over the past several years. And maybe it's just from my personal view, but really collecting for enjoyment versus investment. Was curious what others thought. My personal view is I feel like there's a lot more investment collecting happening, especially in the past couple years. And just curious others' views on that, and how other folks collect. I know personally, I try to collect for enjoyment. A very wise collector many years ago, Vincent Zerzullo, to name drop for a second, dropped wisdom on me through the CAF website. So thanks, Bill, for setting that up, to buy what you love. And I think this is about 12 years ago. So it was a time when prices were not what they are today. And just curious if people are still, if they've heard that wisdom as well, and if they're still approaching purchases that way, or if you're looking at things more from an investment standpoint.
I never look at it from an investment standpoint. I never do, because I am not a big comic art seller yet. I'm still in building. I probably have somewhere around 250 pieces in my collection, and I'm only adding to, not subtracting from. But so I certainly am out there buying from people, but not doing a lot of selling. And I buy what I love. I buy what I like. I like a lot of different things. So my collection is pretty varied, but I don't look at it as an investment, because if you do, to me, it takes away a little bit of the fun and enjoyment to it. if you're only thinking about making money on a piece.
I agree with that. I think I always look at buying art as something on what you can control and what you can't. And buying what you love, buying pieces that you enjoy, you have 100% control over that. Now, you may not be able to get or afford the pieces that you really love, but the ones you choose to buy and add to your collection, you have complete control. What you don't have control is the market. What's going to happen with the investment side of it? So it's almost more natural and actually more fun not to think about that. If it happens, that's a great upside and surprise if it happens to be a good investment. But if you buy what you love, you're never going to go wrong. And I would actually, the corollary is also love what you buy, right? Don't get too caught up in trying to kind of get more and more and more and thinking about, am I investing the right way? I mean, take time to enjoy the pieces that you have. And I think that you'll really get all the enjoyment of what this hobby is about. I just, a year ago, 5 years ago, I just looked back at auction results, and in Heritage, they had some their auction. Interesting that Walking Dead was all the rage back then, very hot.
Yes.
And Deadpool was the clear second fiddle to Cable. From an investment standpoint, those two actually reversed itself over the 5 years, but you can't control that. If you happen to be a Deadpool fan or a Cable fan or love Walking Dead, if you like the stuff you buy, you just can't go wrong, and you can't control what happens on the investment side.
I agree with those points completely, but it's an interesting question that you ask, because I found myself thinking about this just recently, that as my collection gets to a certain point, as it gets larger, and it kind of led into me wanting to be on Dueling Dealers, because I also don't really sell a lot of pieces. I'm not in the marketplace, but I think I'm at the point now where I'm looking at my collection and I'm thinking about how to maneuver it to get what I want down the road. And it's related to what James said in the chat, that the prices are getting so astronomical. And it also depends on the market that you find yourself in. If you're in the modern market, it's getting crazy. Do you even have time to love something before it's gone?
Yeah.
So I look at the pieces that are coming in, knock on wood, every time something comes in, I open it up. I have it out for a few days at least before I catalog it. I just enjoy it, discover it. And as long as you're still doing that, as long as you're still being fiscally responsible, that's a good a sign. But you do have to get to a point where you're going to buy something that you really, really like, but maybe you don't love it. But there's a value in buying it for whatever reason. And that's a very complicated decision. I make those on my own judgments, and everyone's going to have their own metrics. But the prices are getting crazy. And to get a grail for yourself, you need to start building up something to offer other people.
And Mikhail, it sounds like almost a sub-question. Should we start thinking about buying for investment to get the piece that you love?
Interesting.
If you're still in your budget, if you're still following whatever guidelines you're following, I know a general rule of thumb is, no more than 5% of your complete assets should be in this hobby. And then if I want a piece that's worth my entire collection, how do I approach that? How do I think about that? But buying for investment purely in terms of like, I'm going to buy this, put it away, and then, it's going to be a windfall later. That's silly.
I wanted to touch on something you said, Mikhail, about being fiscally responsible. And that's an important term. I mean, investing is certainly something what people do with their assets, but being fiscal responsible, we would like to urge that goes without saying is an important part of what we do. I mean, for everything you buy, there's always an opportunity cost. You're taking funds away that you could do for your family or for your community or for personal other expenses. And I think setting a good budget and being able to make sure you divide what you have in terms of what you want to buy art and stuff that really needs to be fiscally responsible, your expenses and your other is so important, and that provides some discipline. I loved hearing Grant on that other show where he was talking about haggling and really setting to his budget, and I think that fiscal discipline really makes us better collectors, because it means that we have to really cherish what we have, and we have to put a lot of thought into what we buy. And I think by doing that, you end up, I think, becoming a better collector of things, because you're more disciplined in kind of what you bring into the collection. And if that's the case, then kind of the investment side, or what you do with it afterwards, is something you think later on down the road.
I mean, everyone should have their magic number when you think about your gross, and then you think about your net after all of your expenses. You certainly don't want to be spending the money that should pay the rent or the mortgage or food or your retirement savings or any of that. 6 months worth of I work for a bank. 6 months worth of emergency expenses. All of those things that you really should have socked away before you're spending your money. And what I like to do, which could be a good tip for some people, is that even if it's a piece that I want that might be a little pricey, I might have that money in the bank, but I'll still put myself on a payment plan, because it changes my buying behavior. It reminds me to not necessarily just put all that one big outlay, because then I know I'll be looking for another piece the next month. Or maybe I should put the brakes on something and break up some of those payments. So that's just a tip for a new collector, if you're worried about some of the payments.
Right. I mean, it's funny. I have been reading a lot of things in the news lately, that conversations about this very topic, because you're seeing people buying for investment in the trading card market, sports cards, Pokemon,
NFTs, yeah.
NFTs, and there was an article just
Target
the other day.
not stocking sports cards anymore.
Right. Well, and what PSA is not accepting submissions anymore, because they're a year behind, because so many people wanted to get their 9.8 Charizard to be worth $100,000 or something, right? So, and that was in the news, and Heritage was quoted in that, as was Stephen Fischler. So it was. I'll have to dig up that article, because I just read it yesterday and I didn't bookmark it, but it was just interesting to see whom they sought out to speak with about this as a topic, and but they were very much focused on the card market more than comics or even comic art. But it's clearly happening, in all facets of the hobby right now, given the prices that we're seeing on all collectibles at this point. So, but I think by and large, I see more dealers buying with the investments aspect of it than collectors. Although it's something that we all have to consider anymore. I've never bought anything with where I'm thinking about investment. I only just because I want it. But I think, like you guys are saying, you have to be. It has to be a part of your thought process too. One day, that especially when you're buying expensive artwork, that that you're going to be able to recoup that one day.
Yeah. One important consideration to think about is liquidity. I think one of the criticisms back 20 years ago about buying art as an investment, or comics or sports cards, is it wasn't liquid. It would take you 3 months to sell. You had to put an ad in the Comic Buyer's Guide, and you would pay a lot of friction or cost to get that happening. Over the last 20 years, currently, liquidity is improved drastically. I mean, you can go to auction within, I don't know, a month and sell things that you need to. You can go to private deals on CAF with amateur dueling dealers. You can sell something in 5 seconds if you price it properly. So liquidity, fortunately enough, is something that we have, that I think helps make it a better investment, right? Because you don't have to, you have easily more flexibility with your collection, as opposed to 20 years ago, where kind of it takes faxes and weeks or months, if not months, to wait till you have to get to the next convention to be able to sell something.
Yeah, and technologies help with that too. The high resolution scans, some of the things where you really can get a good look at the condition and the edges, and those pieces that you're really wanting to get, and really get a good price, because you have a much more a better understanding about what the condition is these days than in the past.
Now, George, have you thought of things differently than when you first started in the hobby in terms of enjoyment versus investment? Have your views changed, or have you been pretty steady in terms of how you approach things?
Oh, only in the sense that I'm not going after the same stuff. I think there's things that artists that I would buy from, or types of art that I would buy with, like the big two, that I was buying early on because prices were just better 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Where now I'm looking for things that I still enjoy, that may not be the big two, that may be indie artists, that may be newer artists. And And part of the reason I wanted to have this discussion is I think a lot of, and I'm on the outside to an extent, a lot of newer collectors coming in, I think either by guidance from auction houses, whoever else, are looking very investment oriented type purchases, and wanted to have this discussion because I think a lot of us here, and maybe just over time, you think more about, do I love this piece?
Well, we're definitely competing against some people who are coming into this hobby and ones that are close to this one with that have the mindset of buying for investment purposes to divest their holdings so that they can. It's not all in stocks and bonds and foreign currency or whatever they want to normally dabble in. That they're going to the auction houses and looking for advice on what would be a good investment. And so we are competing with people who do have that mindset. And some of us have that mindset. It's definitely where we're going to be for. I don't see it changing, at least in the near future at all. So,
and that affects us because they're bidding on auctions and
right, that we want as well. So we're competing against people with a different mindset than us, and it is probably in part the reason why we've seen prices increase as they have in the last 10 and 12 months.
And when you get the intersection of that Venn diagram, that's the most dangerous collector, right? Someone who loves it and has the funds to kind of put into it and think about it in different ways. And that's just, there's more art being produced as we sit here talking about it, and it can be very reasonable, and it can, I think that's at the end of the day, that's what helps me say no.
Yeah,
there's something tomorrow. There's something the day after.
Definitely makes it less.
It does. And I do want to respond to Christopher's question because it was really good. Do time payments usually include a fee or interest? Usually no, depends on who you're doing business with. If it's a private collector, somebody else's collection, they may charge you for doing installments. They may not. Most of the time, dealers do not charge you for making time payments. They don't charge you an interest rate. And the answer is, what is a meaningful price to begin thinking about asking for time payments? That's a personal choice. Your own personal policy. My answer is not going to be the same as Dino's answer. It's not going to be the same as Mikhail's answer or George's answer. So a lot of dealers will have a minimum that they say, we won't do time payments unless your purchase is more than $750. Let's just put a number out there. So, but really, it's all about what you personally can handle or prefer to handle for your own financial situation. But a lot of these guys will do time payments for stuff under $1,000 even.
They will, and every dealer has different policies on how long they want to wait. And some people have waited. I know Mike has a few people who are paying off things for the last couple of years, and the artist sits there. He doesn't charge them any interest. He probably hounds them a bit more after the first 12 months. But yeah, most of those guys are pretty flexible on their approach to that. They want to keep customers happy, and if that's what it takes to extend those time periods, then they will. But I have known that many collectors, either collector to collector or collector to dealer, have actually gotten into agreements where there are stipulations where you could lose that down payment if you don't pay within a certain time frame. So there's many different ways to do it, but in the loosey-goosey way of doing time payments with a dealer, typically those would be interest-free. But other ones, I've heard of some people getting losing some money and some art because of the contractual things that have gone into some deals in the past. And
just another aspect of it that I just recently came across, somebody I was speaking with said that they lost a little bit of money because the exchange rate worked against them on their time payment.
Oh, right.
Which, with the euro can really fluctuate, or if it's in pounds, God forbid.
Yeah.
There's a lot of comments. This sounds like a good topic to do for another week, because there's a lot of people asking great questions about time payments and exchange and how long is too long, a lot of this stuff. I think it's a good topic to talk about it later. So dibs on that one, I guess.
Perfect.
All right. Good. Great.
And thank you, Nick, as always, and for encouraging people to like the show on YouTube. I certainly appreciate it. And also Jeff as well. Thanks for the super chat. I appreciate it. Every one of those. So I agree. This is a good topic that it could be revisited, because there are lots of interesting things related to it. Like someone asked, when do you get the art? Well, in most cases, you're getting it after the fact, once you're fully paid off. There are some occasions where if you have a good relationship with the dealer and they know you're good for it, they might send it. But by and large, there's it's going to sit on the dealer's table until you've paid for it. So actually, Mikhail, would you like to start us off by showing some artwork?
I'd love to.
All right. Well, here, let me get the first artwork up here. This is an one of my favorite artists too. So.
I mean,
nice.
What I really liked about this aspect of the conversation was that I didn't even have to think about my first two pieces. This is one of my favorites, and I can't say exactly why, but it's just an image that resonates with me, and I believe it came up in the best of 2019 and did really well, and that's where I first saw it. So that was a great thing that Kath put on that exposed me to the piece. And the collector has a fantastic collection as well, very diverse, artists that I wouldn't have looked at. And then what else I like about this is that David Peterson has also written a very extensive blog post about putting this together. Mm-hmm. And so you can go and read about all his process. But just looking at it aesthetically, the lighting, the work with the inks to accentuate the light source. And even though it's a very full picture, it's not jarring to the mind. You look at it and it's very peaceful. It's Donatello in its element. I just love looking at this piece. And the owner actually closed his cast gallery recently. I think, people do that while they're rearranging or, putting a deal together or something. And I reached out to him and said, oh, I hope everything's okay. And he's like, yeah, I was just making some changes, and put it back up. And then I went and looked at it again because I just love this piece. And the detail, there's a lot of Easter eggs as well. The books in the crate that he's sitting on. Mouse Guard, obviously, was written by David Peterson. And then you've got some little Easter eggs below that as well. So just a really fun, spectacular piece that just brings a smile to my face every time I see it.
David Peterson has always been one of my favorite artists out there. And he used to have a gallery on CAF, but I know that he got hounded a lot for some of the artwork they had in his collection and early on, and he shut it down and never came back. And so that's and I hear that story, a few times a year where people just don't want to be bothered with people making offers and that sort of thing. But I remember when I talked to him about it, and this was early on, around 2005. I just remember he was just like, I will never have a gallery on your site again. It was that it
wow.
hurt him. It hurt him that
Wow.
bad.
Wow.
And so that was really disappointing to me because I admire him a lot. So, but
all right, folks, do better. We're chasing awesome people away. Come on.
Exactly. So that is a lesson you think about. You don't want to hound somebody like that.
Yeah.
That is why when I told you the number one request feature on CAF is how do you block a particular user from contacting you. So, and I don't have a way to do that. So that's there's something to that. But here, let me show the second artwork.
And hounding a person is a great segue into this piece because right, Action 583 to me is a title like Watchmen or Dark Knight Returns. I mean, I've literally, when I first got into the hobby, I'd meet dealers and they'd be like, oh, what are you looking for? I'd say like Action 583, and some of them even would say, oh, what's that? To me, it's just, this is the book that I had that I read dog-eared. It's an Alan Moore story. It's completely different from anything else.
Wow.
And it's all about turning things around. And so this is Grail level stuff for me. Any page from this book, this is the first thing I've been looking for since I started. Haven't had any luck with them. But I love that the cover is out there with, in this phenomenal collection of David Mandel. And I heard some stories about how he did the hard job of extracting it from where it was in captivity. So I'll always appreciate him for that. And I love that it's up here. And then when we get into it, it's it seems straightforward, but there's so much going on. Obviously Superman's face. I was exchanging emails with another phenomenal collector, and we were talking about Superman, and he said, Superman doesn't, because I said I'm looking for pages from Action 583, and he's like, oh, Superman doesn't really do it for me, and that's something I hear all the time. And the stories that seem to resonate are, All-Star Superman. They started off with him dying, so they take away so much of that godlike power, and this story does exactly that. It just turns everything inside out. And I think the story then gives the cover even more weight. But it's an image that's referenced quite a bit back and forth as well. So, and this may come from another reference, I'm not sure. But just, all the people down there saying goodbye, the look on his face, it's just, to me, an iconic cover and one that I really, really love. And if you haven't read the story, I encourage you to go and check it out. And then I wanted to show, I realized I had a kind of homage piece to this, which is by Brian Hitch. When they did away with the Clark Kent persona, it's almost like Superman turned around and took off his glasses and is looking back down on that same view from the Action 583 cover. That's kind of fun for me, but just a cover and a piece that I really, really love, and I love seeing it.
It's just a classic image. What strikes me is the Superman's face is sad. You very rarely see that, in such an iconic image. He seems very lonely and sad, and so that would draw my eye. And wow, look at the images on it.
Exactly, going back to Jill's pick from last week. That's why I love my piece. It's that melancholy aspect to it. It's not him being like hip hip hooray. There's sadness. There's resignation. There's a sort of defeat.
And so you kind of got this story in three parts. The page you just showed, for the scan that Bill was able to put up, the one that you held up would be part 2, and then the Zakevich would be part 3, where he does actually turn around and start flying away. It's kind of how I see it. And I think that's cool.
Who drew that? Was that Kurt Swan?
Yes, Kurt Swan and
Anderson. Wow.
And I'm gonna have to look that one up. I shamefully didn't know it, but the more I looked at that cover, the more I found things that I loved about it, from Superman's face, his hands, the pose, to the buildings, and then finally realized there's like a group of 20 people at the bottom. And when you zoom in, there's some nice detail there as well. It's a really
and that Daily Planet used to be quite iconic. They don't use it as much nowadays, but
yeah.
Right.
If you think back to the first movie, I mean, that was amazing. They did a fantastic job with that.
Agreed.
Well, thank you for indulging me on these
great
pieces.
picks.
I hope you guys enjoyed them.
Yes, and Dino, you get to take the next topic.
Okay, so again, we just wanted I wanted to respond to a number of emails about kind of the subject of financial flexibility and how do you prepare for that special purchase? What are some of the options and considerations that you'd use if a opportunity, for example, if Mikhail had the opportunity to buy that Action 583 cover, what kind of things, what would go through his mind? What are some of the considerations? And I think, Bill, there's a collector, Kevin, who has a kind of a situation that he went through just a week ago. I think he wanted to kind of use that as a case study. So let's pop that up on the, there he is. So there's Kevin. He is a 90s art collector, loves X-Men. He has a chance to get a page from his favorite artist, Jim Lee, a nice Jim Lee X-Men page, cost $6,000. And he wants the art, but he wants to know kind of what are the options? How should he pay for it? So you can see here from his collection, really nice assortment of 90s art, a lot of good names represented: Todd McFarlane, Buscema, Liefeld, Valentino Larson. He actually does have a Jim Lee commission, it looks like. And so when he looks at this, he kind of thinks, okay, well, and I'm sure all of us collectors have been in this situation before, where we're kind of, we got that piece that we want to go after, and kind of we're thinking through kind of what are the options? What should I pay cash? Should I sell something? And if I do sell something, how do you choose kind of what you want to sell? So I think right here outlies kind of the three normal options that people would think of. What's interesting is all these decisions sometimes take place within, you know, a 2-minute period if you're on the heritage auction, or much you have to make a buying decision. So this is an example of a situation where Kevin has to make a choice. So here's some considerations. So option A, he can pay cash, but $6,000 is a pretty good chunk of his 8 to 10,000 budget. So that's a big chunk, and he'd have to kind of tally back a lot of his purchases for the remaining of the year. But if he loves the page, right, that's something to go after. Option B, I think a lot of collectors they'll just sell one piece. They'll sell the comparable. So in this case, I think the 7,500 that he could get from the Todd McFarlane Spider-Man page, it would pay for the X-Men. And you always hear those kind of, I was able to trade up from one page to something I really, really enjoyed. And it was just a simple transaction. And I think he has enough value there that even if this were a dealer where he had to do a trade, typically dealers would want a little bit more back, but he could do that. So Kevin could get the page he wants. Another option that goes through people's minds is, okay, sell your duplicate. So he's finally getting his Jim Lee X-Men page. So why not, if he gets rid of his Buscema Wolverine panel page, his X-Men panel from Portacio, and his Jim Lee Batman commission, voila, he gets his $6,000. So again, these are just three options that I think we all face, and maybe you can do a quick poll on the comments to choose A, B, and C. Let me know kind of what you think would be your choice if you were in Kevin's shoes. I'll give you 20 seconds or 25 seconds, and let's see what some of you guys think.
I would start off with C. I'll just throw that out there. Yeah, that would be my first choice.
Even though that's multiple pieces, it makes sense to get rid of things that are less desirable to get that big thing. Lot of C's, a lot of A's. Good. Jill, what would your choice be?
I said a combination of C and A. I might,
okay.
Dependent upon those three pieces, if there's one of them that I just knew would really, really hurt to sell, I might do part cash, part selling of a duplicate.
Got it. Well, again, thanks for the responses. A lot of people, cash seems to be the easiest one because you don't have to get rid of something that you like, which is nice. And so if you can pan back, Bill, I think I'm texting with Kevin. I think he's telling me what his answer is, and well, actually, he just sent you a slide. Maybe you can put that up. So this is what happened to Kevin. So he actually said, you know what, we buy a lot of stuff, but he's got to put just as much thought into what he sells and not just kind of getting rid of things arbitrarily, because he's a collector with very specific and unique interests. And so he applied our personal value discussion that we did a few weeks back, and he kind of said, if you rank the collection based on not total value, but kind of what his positive value is, you can get to and identify three pieces where he literally has no extra value, extra personal value. So these are basically commodities. These are things that he would basically PV equals FMB equals cash equivalent. So he would view this as cash equivalent. And I think by looking at this way, he can get rid of pieces that don't necessarily have any additional or incremental value attached to it. So in this case, he went and sold his McFarlane Infinity page and his Jusco Deja Thoris painting, and that got him the 6,000. And then he was able to keep some things that I think he may have regretted later on. And you always hear collectors saying, you know what, I got this piece, but I had to let go of X, or it took me a while, but I had to sell a bunch of things to get to this very important piece. And I think if you think about the whole collecting journey as a bunch of purchases, but also a bunch of sales as well, for those who do that, you have to be careful, because if you make the choices on your sales in a way that that will create least regret, I think that way over time, over months and years, and your collection will actually build and grow with much more, and you'll be able to keep things that you really love. So you can see how his collection looks afterwards. The total value of his collection is still the same. It's about 30,000 for all 9 pieces. He has 9 instead of 10, but the total market value is about the same. But more importantly, he's added to his positive personal value. He's gotten rid of 2 pieces that he didn't really value more than the market does. And he added the Jim Lee X-Men page, which he attributes a lot more personal value to. So I think if you do this over cycles, over a number of transactions, you'll notice that by paying really good attention to what you sell will help you keep pieces that you won't regret, but also really enjoy. As you move forward, as your collecting journey unfolds. So you can pan back out. So I think the lesson here is, again, it's not just what you buy, but what choices you have. Cash is something that you can't always just have under the mattress, and you have to that weighs into your decision away. Cash is easy. That's why cash is king. But by looking at pieces that have a cash equivalency, meaning you're not going to cry if you let it go, if you get market value for, gives you a lot of financial flexibility. And I'll end with something kind of more broader. Well, actually, 2 things. One is, theoretically, you can find, if you find the ultimate piece, if you have to sell your entire collection to get it, it may be worth it. Or if Mikhail has to sell 12 pieces to get a cover that he loves, it may be worth it. The last thing I'll leave on financial flexibility goes beyond comics art. And I think as collectors like myself on the back 9 of their journey, and those people who are starting to kind of liquidate some of their long-held art to do things of a personal nature. They're gonna, buy a boat or fund their retirement, or do something very special for their family. Put their kids to college, or do something very, substantial in their community. We actually have to not bemoan that, but applaud that, because what they've done is they've chosen to convert what they built in the terms of collection, and they love their art, but they found another avenue for it where that gives them a little bit financial flexibility to do some things that they otherwise couldn't do. So, at some point in all of our collection careers, we're going to have times where we're reach a point where some things outside the hobby are going to be more pressing, more necessary, and even more convenient and more enjoyable than the art that we've held for years. And I think having that store of value, that financial flexibility, and knowing what to do it to make the most impact to your own lives and to your families and the communities that we live in, I think that's the ultimate financial flexibility, and how we kind of take heart in kind of what we're building as collections that may have value down the road. So I'll turn that over to the other panelists for comments or thoughts.
But also, if you're in this situation, it's always good to consult your own financial planner or tax advisor. Someone that's going to maybe take a little bit of the emotion out of it. They're not necessarily financial planners that specialize in comic art. I wish there were. But just to talk to somebody about the nuts and bolts of finances and what things could be worth, and it's worth the time if you're buying pieces in this kind of stratosphere, the prices you're listing.
Exactly, and you'd be amazed how many rash decisions get done in terms of, as we said, Kevin's situation, just selling something because, hey, this is my most valuable piece. I'm going to get rid of it and I'm going to buy something else. But if you keep doing that, after 10 years, you'll still have just one piece, and you've gotten rid of so many things that you would have enjoyed. So thank you for Kevin for writing in today. But I think that was a good example of how you can be thoughtful in some of your sell decisions to pay for some of the things that you want to buy.
And I see a lot of folks talking about crying when you sell something. I totally feel that pain. I'm also not great at selling, but I find myself preemptively, on occasion throughout the years, looking at pieces and saying, is this something I could sell? Because it takes me a little time to prepare myself mentally, like, could I get rid of this piece? But having that running list, maybe you don't have to write it down, but maybe it's something you're just thinking about as you're going through your gallery, as you're going through your portfolios, of like, is this something I could part with? So when the time comes, when you are in Kevin's shoes, you have a mental list, or maybe it's an actual portfolio of things you're putting things in.
You're right. That being prepared so that you can act quickly and decisively, I think, is all the thing. I mean, I think you lose a lot if you have to kind of think through and say, well, I don't know what I'm going to do, and can I afford that piece? So just having all that with you, is really helpful.
And I have heard before, and that the second you put a price on something, like someone wrote to you and inquired about a piece, and you put a price on it and said, okay, yeah, I could let it go for this. The minute you do that, apparently you've crossed a barrier where that piece becomes something that can go. But on the flip side of that, I will say I did have an experience once where someone wrote to me and asked about something, and I gave them a price that would have made me happy and I felt was, fair given the situation. And the minute I sent that email, I was like, man, I hope he says no. So that was one instance where I was wrong. And the reason why I even gave him the price was I was pre-planning because I knew a Watchman page was coming up on Heritage that I was going to go after. So the decision-making process really can be dependent. But what I liked about the whole process for me was that even if he had said yes, I would have gotten a good price, and it would have gone towards something that I knew was coming up that I did buy. I knew I was going to buy. So, I hoped.
That's another wrinkle in all this is, do you do the selling before the thing comes up for auction or becomes available so that you can try to, what if you sell your stuff and then you don't end up winning that piece? Yep. That puts you in a bind. But
and then you make a rash
go through that all the time. Yeah, we do that all the time. Because you want to be ready. You want to have those funds available.
And that was luckily coincidental because the person actually reached out to me. And so the timing was, like the only reason I even got the price was because I saw the thing was coming. So
yeah. I think
thank you very much, Dino, for helping Kevin.
Yeah, no, Kevin, I'm sure he's happy with what he got, and I think we all kind of look back and hopefully we make the right decisions year over year, and at times, I mean that's what it makes it exciting, because we won't always make the right decisions, but you learn to kind of get better feeling for what really drives you and what pieces really are worth going after. Going to bat for things that you really love, I think is half the battle, right? You certainly wouldn't do that if it's a med piece or something that you just want to check the box off, if it's not something that you really want. So.
And Kevin got lucky that he knows he just has to reach out to McSpidey fan and offer him the.
Yes, I think McSpidey did want every piece on that list. So.
That's right.
Yeah. And the McFarlane ASM is such an interesting example because that is a page that just gets harder and harder to let go of. Like day by day, you're like, why would I get rid of this? Why? I'm never going to replace it.
It's a vicious cycle, right? It's a vicious cycle, because if you won't sell, that means some other collector is going to be bidding up whatever comes. I mean, so it's and that's why this is so unpredictable. What's going to happen in the market? But you can control what pieces you go after, right? That's the only thing that you can define what really you enjoy as a collector. And then, as George said, go after those pieces. That's what you can control.
Very true. But I'd say these first two topics have generated a lot of chat, more so than I've seen in the past. So these, very, very important things for us to be discussing.
Well, thanks for writing in. We had at least three or four different dimensions on that I hope to wrap up, and we'll find other ways of follow up and do some more on episodes down the line.
Definitely. I got a very interesting email today from someone that had three very specific topics they were hoping we would discuss at some point, and it was all sort of focused on your personal estate planning and the preparation you make if something were to ever happen to you.
Oh, wow.
Because there's obviously that's a really large topic, and I'm sure we would look at it one way, auction houses would look at it one way, dealers who might like to help would look at it a different way. So that would be a very interesting thing for us to cover at some point as well.
Definitely.
Sorry, one final note, just to touch on something Jill said. I have seen Instagram ads for businesses purporting to be advisors on comic art buying for an investment already.
Wow.
And I would urge any viewer to just not really deal with those. I cannot see that there's a legitimate business up and running yet that we don't know about. With I mean, it could be in the building, but I've seen the same thing with the collectibles market. There were these apps for like buying parts of collectibles. You could buy a part of a car. It was just, absurd.
Interesting.
I'd be very cautious about getting.
Well, when it starts, I'm a prince in Nigeria and I am an expert in comic art. To be cautious. So.
Definitely.
Even if it's Dino, you know to be caught. No.
And I don't know if Nigeria has a prince, but I've always felt sorry if there was a
For
prince.
those people, that's right. They get a bad rap.
Yeah.
So, wow. Well, and yes, and I can say I haven't heard from anyone. So as far as I'm concerned, there's no legitimate company out there that would be doing anything of the sort yet.
Yeah. And you have us, all the fellow collectors. You can always reach out on CAF to people, get their views, and
Right.
Why go outside the hobby?
Exactly. All right. Well, Jill, I think we can look at your artwork now.
All right, let's do it.
All right, here we go.
Okay, so this piece I love. This is from a cover number 45 from an indie series called East of West. It is done by Nick Dragotta, and this is in the gallery of Teddy M on CAF. If you guys have not read East of West, and I show you this image, and nothing in this image piques your interest about trying to read this series, I just can't help you. Because the East of West is this fabulous comic, 45 issues. So this is the cover to the last issue. It's kind of a sci-fi Western Game of Thrones is how I can best describe it, because there's a lot of different factions that are warring over the world. And clearly you can see represented here, different members of each one of the factions. And so you've got Western elements, you've got sci-fi elements with some pretty technology that's futuristic. There's lots of conflict. There's lots of really interesting elements that are brought in, like, Western mythos and a Native American mythos elements. And so I just love this cover because it's just lots of action popping out at you. It makes you want to know who some of those characters are. My favorite's kind of in the bottom right. She, female, of course, with the white hair, and then that's character's name is Crow. So she's my personal pick for a favorite on the cover, but just loved it. Just love this cover.
Killer cover. One of my favorite things of the series is the designs and artwork. And I think someone mentioned in the chat that Dragotta mostly works digitally. So it's incredible, I think, not only to have a cover, but a double spread cover. Mm-hmm. Or was this 2 different issues?
Oh, it was a wraparound.
It was a wraparound. Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. So
the floating eyeball and the big gun coming at you definitely draws your attention. But wow, look at the detail and the depth and different the play of black versus white. It's just awesome.
Yeah, this was a great series. And Hickman wrote it. And if you've ever read any of Hickman's stuff, he's got this particular style that was really showcased very well in this series. So. I just, it's my pet cause. Sometimes I'm like, you guys, you got to read East of West, because it was an indie, so it doesn't get the readership of a Batman or a Superman or an X-Men. So I just like to carry the torch sometimes.
I haven't read it, but now I will.
Good. I'm glad. It's out there. You can already get it in trade paperback. So you don't necessarily have to buy the individual issues if you don't want to. So I would say if you're a neighbor, you could drop by and I'd let you borrow, but
that's a bit of a drive.
It's okay. And then for my second piece, I just thought I'd go with something fun, something a little sexy. Why not on a Sunday night? So this is, of course, The Goblin Queen by Clay Mann. This is in the collection of Dean Abraham. And Clay Mann is one of those guys that I think is just getting better and better and better and better. His work on Heroes in Crisis was just phenomenal. And so I just thought this was a great representation of what he does best, in my opinion, which is texture and just how things, there's great foreground, midground, and background in everything that he does. And I just, he's a very nice guy when you meet him. He doesn't really do a lot of, or hasn't done commissions at conventions pre-COVID. So anybody that's got a piece from him that's this in-depth, I'm truly very jealous.
Love Clay's work.
Yeah. I mean, who doesn't want to hang out with Madeline Pryor up there with some gargoyles,
Again, that read the theme of like the Batman on gargoyle. Now it's Goblin on gargoyle. Gog. OG.
Just as you were talking about
in
the
Art
foreground,
Deco, we like.
and you were talking about the background, and I was just noticing like the little tower right underneath his signature in the corner, and then I looked up and saw the back of the gargoyle, and that's fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Just really thinking very holistically about the piece and placing her really nicely. It's really a nice piece.
Yeah.
I've got some clay man behind me as well on the wall.
Oh, do you?
Of course you do.
Of course.
There we go. I don't know how to point. There we go.
We're on Georgia's M wall. Like if you go through his house, he's got 26.
Now that's a goal that I will never achieve. But that would be cool.
Is it hanging next to your McFarlane, Mann McFarlane? No.
No, it's Sean Murphy. So
Murphy.
Oh,
I guess
It is the M wall.
Yeah.
That's so
All
cool.
right. Mikhail, you get to do the next topic.
All right.
And we're going to do some camera work here.
Yeah, we're gonna. Oh, that's right. So I thought we'd change things up, and I really enjoy framing, and I thought I'd get into some framing nuts and bolts. You guys can ask questions about any aspect of it that you might find interesting. Now, what's nice about this is it's a metal frame, and those are very easy to work with, and you can change the pieces out if you want very easily. So you'll see that the piece has shifted, and there's a bit of white coming down the side there. So I'm going to open it up and see if we can get that sorted out. So the back of a metal frame, you're not going to see the paper like you will with the traditional frame, which is good and bad. The paper does help, if it's applied properly with a good adhesive, it'll help keep a lot of the atmosphere out.
This is MacGyver kit.
Mikhail,
I wanted to.
Did you buy this piece framed?
Done. Normally, I would do this, and you run into trouble. And so, all right. The first thing you should know is that in a metal frame, the tension is held in by these curved metal pieces, and they slide between the backing and the edge of the frame, creating tension, holding everything in place. So the first thing you do is you just remove them. They come out with quite a bit of tension, depending on. So be careful. I've cut myself a few times. And I was very lucky because there was a framing workshop next to my house when I really started collecting original art. And what a framing workshop does is that they give you a space and the tools to do your own framing, which drastically reduces the price. Yeah. And I was doing a lot of framing because when I started in the hobby, the goal was to frame everything that I bought.
It's also worth pointing out when you use metal frames, the reason why that's an advantageous is because that when wooden frames, you can often have things nailed down or stapled, and that's with a metal frame, you're always using clips and tension, as Mikhail showed, which allows you to really change out things more easily.
You can see, yes, absolutely, and when you're doing any framing, make sure that your framer is using modern techniques. Because if they're not using the right materials, nothing is going to, work properly for you. So the fun thing is, you really only need to undo one side of the frame.
That's good to know. I would have taken all four corners off.
Yeah, so you can see immediately it just slides off. And then what I was trying to avoid doing is taking off the...
Do you have band-aids nearby just in case? I mean, there's lots of metal and glass going on here.
So you can see, I know, it can pause, the process can pause at times, but...
yeah, thanks, Marcus.
It's
Marcus
very easy
removed the hanger.
once you get into it. And the most important thing is just have the space to do it.
Oh, it slides. And again, the value of this is Mikhail is doing it himself as opposed to going to a framer and they'll charge you $50 or 75 to kind of change out something. So if you can learn to do it yourself, it gives you a lot more flexibility to put your pieces up.
Another tip is to try to have gloves ready. The museum glass in particular can be extremely sharp around the edges. And it also just helps you not get fingerprints on the glass.
Of course, Mikhail's gloves match his shirt. Just wanted to point that out.
And I hope you're enjoying the pajamas.
Nice.
You are getting lots of pajama comments.
All right, so.
At least you're wearing pants, man.
I thought about not wearing pants, but you know.
You made the right choice.
All right, so this is the frame. You see, it just folds up in place. And you flip this around. Remove the glass, keep the front down somewhere safe. And then you can see the linen tape probably just dried out during the move. In fact, I think when I originally did this, I got lazy and did masking tape with a acid-free backing.
That hurts my heart, masking tape.
I know. I learned a lot. So it's good that I'm doing this. Here's what you want to be using. Here, I pulled out some things that we use regularly. pH neutral glue, archival mounting strips, and everyone's best friend, linen tape. And the linen tape is what you should have used, what I should have used in the first place. And then what you basically will do is take out some strips of tape. It just really just holds it in place momentarily. And then you can achieve a bind with the mat. Just place it. You don't have to be too precious about this, you know. Push it down. Keep tension. Your hands should be clean, obviously.
Voila.
You can see I fixed the gap. I'll put my gloves back on, flip the glass back over, and just reassemble, just slide it back in, tighten it up, and get some fresh tension pieces.
That's awesome.
So this is a custom mat I had done for this piece. It's a larger piece. It probably wouldn't work very well with anything else, but I had this frame, which I actually had made for my McFarlane.
Wow.
And I took that out when I moved to California. And then the Jim Lee that I'd been waiting for showed up and I wanted it on the wall. So I just slipped it into this one and it works perfectly.
Wow.
If you keep the colors relatively neutral, just a nice black mat, I like to give it some space. The white pops. And this silver frame kind of always works nicely to bring the white back out.
I mean, I do always recommend using a mat because it keeps that piece of art from being right up against the glass, which can cause, long-term can cause damage to your art. So it is always a good idea to use a mat.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then there's exceptions to that when, depending on what you're framing. You know, if you're framing a print, you know, you can avoid using a mat. You can use a museum plexi now directly up against it. And the important thing is if you can find a place that helps you, that lets you experiment the main cost is in just the frame, and with the wooden frame, they'll often join them for you, and then you can do the rest of it very easily. I can swap out a wooden frame as well without too much problem, but you just need a workspace.
And do you buy the mat with the frame, or do you buy those separate?
I order them usually together.
Oh, awesome.
Because they have to fit the exact dimensions, right, of the frame, right? You don't want to leave a gap.
Well, that was you had me glued to the screen, Mikhail.
That was awesome.
I was expecting you to get cut or something bad to happen, and everything went perfect.
I learned my lessons, believe it or not.
We would have gone viral then for sure.
But again, it's so worth it. I mean, you look at all of our all of the five of us, we enjoy having stuff on the walls, and if you do have the ability to do what Mikhail just did, it allows you to frame and put things on your wall, but also change things out as your whim, or maybe.
And let me tell you the best part about it for me: you do not leave the art with anyone for any period of time. Mm-hmm. Take it in yourself, you frame it, you bring it home, like that, and that was very peace of mind for me.
That's right. I mean, you're always scared when you go into your framer and your person that you deal with isn't there, and the guy comes up, he's chewing bubble gum and he's got dirty fingers, and you're kind of, I mean, you're just like, thank you, I'll come back, right? And
they set their drink down on it. It's fine.
Yeah. But I think I was just gonna, one I love what Mikhail, that look. I try to do that as part of my storage thing. So I do everything that Mikhail does except for framing, but allows me to kind of have pieces that have that finished look without. Now, obviously, I can't hang it on the walls, but it does make those pieces look much better when you can frame it, put it on the wall, and enjoy it. Right. I
love your presentation, Dino, and I remember when you first put it up on CGC. I was really fascinated by the whole process. How do you account for the different sizes, though? I have so many different sizes of actual artwork.
Well, I have two. I have a regular size, and then I have. You'll see my little dealer wall here.
That room looks cool.
No dog tonight, though.
Oh,
I'll sneak in tomorrow.
It's big size. So with two sides, this does twipes up and this does regular size. So I kind of have.
Where do you get your materials?
I just get them through. I custom order them in bulk through Matt Board and More, and it allows me to kind of just have everything uniform, so I can. Got it. I'll get this on that later show, but you can flip through art like you would like comics. So
awesome. Now, I love that presentation. I was curious. I did want to ask how many, if any, other collectors. So I personally do prints of my originals. So I'll scan them in. And part of the reason I do that is it allows me to resize to a standard frame. The other part is you don't have to worry about all the things that the everyone's mentioned already. I was wondering if anyone else ever prints copies basically of your art, or do you prefer the real thing on the wall?
So far, for me, it's been the real thing. I mean, I will go. If it's a cover, I'll make sure that I have a copy of the book.
Okay.
That cover is on, so I have the book as well as the art, but I haven't done a copy of it.
I've heard of collectors who don't want to expose them to sunlight, so they actually make a photocopy at Kinko's and they frame that, put it on their wall. Even I know a prominent dealer that does that with their covers. But to me, the time it takes to frame something, put it on your wall. I mean, what's authentic and what's not. So if it would be ingenuous, I think, to myself if I'm looking at something that I know that's not the real thing, because part of the fun of this hobby is getting the real things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just try to keep it out of the sun. It doesn't matter what kind of glass you have on it. That's my defining feature by how I put things up. If the sun's hitting that wall in any direct way, it can't have art. And then if you really want something, a print's definitely the best way to go.
And Mikhail, your pieces on the wall behind you, they're different sizes. So each one you do based on the relative size of the piece?
For the most part,
a standard border.
When it's 11 by 17, the difference is minuscule. So even if you were cutting off part of the art, no one can tell. So the frame.
And is there any danger in putting art underneath a mat?
Not if the mat is acid free.
Got it.
The mat, and then I have a pages that are very toned from having acid mats on them. I think you always have. There are some collectors who frame without a mat, and you can do it so that the glass is not touching the art. I find the framing to be a little bit finicky. It does tend to shift around, and for me, the mat and often a mat does another purpose in which it holds the art down flat.
Right.
Sometimes you get a watercolor piece.
We should let people know that a mat keeps the art from touching the glass, which can generate moisture if you don't have that separation, and that could damage.
You don't want anything directly up against the art. So, and it just really enhances it. Then you can get into the colors, and you can paint the edge of the mat to just really bring in highlights. There's really a lot that can be done.
Nice.
And there's beautiful frames too. I mean, the framing can just get crazy as well.
That's my problem. I spend money on art and not framing because it's all one budget. So I tend to spend the money on the art and put in a portfolio and wait on framing.
That's why I was so happy to start framing myself, to just save that money. Just went into more art.
That's why I do the print with the Michael's frame or Joanne's frame, and then I pull the portfolio out when I want to look at the real thing. That's just me.
I think as long as you're enjoying the art, that's what counts.
Yeah. It's more of a reminder on the walls to pull my portfolios out.
And I met collectors who, like, they'll spend $400 to frame a $100 piece, but it means so much to them to be able to see that every day.
Yeah.
And you know, this Venom piece, I'm not going to have it in the family room. I'm not having it the first thing people see when they come into the house. So you also have to consider, you know, that I had a huge space and I downgraded to a smaller personal space. So now I have a lot of stuff that can't be displayed or hangs in a closet.
Well, you can tell Mikhail's good with the tool. He opened up that toolkit. They look very professional there, Mikhail.
Yeah, I'm learning by doing.
When do you use the glue? You showed the little adhesive glue. Where do you use that for to adhere it to wet, to thicker pieces?
You can use, so let me quickly show you.
See, I hope the viewers realize you're getting all access here. We're going into our closets and under our drawers. And
so I have this piece. I think I showed it previously. So it's an Alex Ross cover.
Oh, wow.
And it's an odd size. And I didn't have space to have it framed. So I made an enclosure for it that is acid free. So the backing paper is acid free.
That is sick.
This is a handmade cotton paper. And then, so the glue I used to put all of this together. And then I use the archival mounting strips to actually hold it in place. So it's not bound, it's not held in by anything, just by tension again. So,
wow.
But sometimes I have odd shaped pieces like this that needed a solution. And I've really looked at a bunch of different solutions to try and figure out how to store my art uniformly, which is why I loved what Dino showed. But you know, I still have a 17 by 22 portfolio. I have the 18 by 24. It's just insanity.
I just ordered my first 18 by 24. Not even something I knew existed.
I have the story. I ordered a 17 by 22. The day it showed up, my first Liam Sharp showed up, and that's 18 by 24. So I had to immediately order.
Oh, nice.
I was like, what is this giant package that Albert is sending me? This is insane.
Yep.
So
I can see a future episode. We'll talk to comic art sizes from, you know, small to extra large, and that would be interesting.
I got to say though, when you have an 11 by 17 portfolio that's just full of 11 by 17s, it's pretty nice.
It is. It's like your own artist edition, right? Just right there to look at it, but it's the real thing.
Yep.
Good. I don't think we can top that. My engineering skills. Certainly.
It's born of necessity, you know, otherwise the piece is just floating around and my kids are going to draw on it.
Very impressive, Mikhail. Next show, he's going to fix his printer.
I have an email saved in my archives that's with my dad's printer drivers that I just send him every couple of months because somehow he's always deleting his printer drivers. Is that even a thing anymore?
Awesome.
So just so everybody knows, I'm having a few internet problems here. I don't know if it shows up for you or not, but like all the feeds are kind of jumbled a little bit for me. So I'm just going to keep my mouth shut because I feel like I might get kicked offline for any minute now. So I hope that doesn't happen though. So George, you get to speak about some artwork next.
Awesome.
And Mikhail, thank you. That was
thank you, Mikhail.
Again
awesome.
a very engaging episode. I hope we get to do something like that again with some hands-on tutorials.
I hope it didn't bore anyone.
No,
I don't think so. No, not at all.
I think the no shoes added to the excitement, by the way.
I feel like everyone's jumping in to be nice because they're like, "Thank God that's over."
We're not that nice. No.
Show me your art.
It's the comment that says he's got 3 McFarlanes but can't afford pants.
He's
I'm
got
just
an
smart
Alex
enough to know
Ross
that
and a
pants are not
custom
comfortable.
portfolio, but
Oh boy! All right, let's look at some artwork here, George.
Awesome, yeah.
Ooh.
This Tommy Lee Edwards, one of my favorite artists that doesn't do enough comics in my opinion, but Tommy does a little bit of everything from movie concept art, designs for movies and film, and a couple different books. I think he's working on a Jupiter Legacy book right now. But this was a storm piece he did actually for a friend, Tyler, at A Wave Blue World, who collects a lot of the punk rock Mohawk era storm pieces. I mean, the light and dark contrast in this piece, the subtle use of color. One of my favorite things about Tommy, and maybe it comes from his movie and film work, is that every piece I look at, I feel like this could be someone out in the world. It still captures kind of the imagination, but it feels like it could be real. And that's something that really strikes me in his work, in addition to just his amazing skills and mastery of the craft.
That's beautiful.
I love the pops of purple in it. It's unexpected and it's just more depth.
I've always thought that drawing rain scenes really tests an artist, and you can see how different artists do rain. If they do it well, it looks so dramatic and it looks just sensational. If they don't do it well, it kind of just bleeds and it doesn't really showcases it doesn't really highlight what they're trying to show. So this one just nails it. I mean, with the lighting and the rain and the expression on the face and the colors, as Jill pointed out, wonderful.
And yeah, Chris, if you follow him on Instagram, he's constantly working on cars when he's not working on art.
Yeah, I've always been a big fan of Tommy's work. He's done a lot of work in film, and he's just got a very unique style.
Yeah. All right, more Venom. And I saw Michael comment. We share a love for Jim Chung, and this piece was one I think Jim did earlier this year. I mean, just the contrast from the background to the character drawing to the hand-drawn Venom logo, just all the little details. I don't know. I love Jim's work. And there's just a lot of technique that I feel like he put into this piece. And also the excitement of the trailer last week. I felt like this was one I had to.
You got to love when they do the hand-drawn titles.
Yeah,
that really pops, makes it finished.
And it's got some cool texture in the lettering too. If you look at the piece on cap, I think this one was I think James. We chatted a little bit this week. Yeah, James Griffin in his cap gallery.
That's great.
Yeah, and I should note that I did not put the links to all of our featured artwork into the description, but I will have that in there as soon as the show is over.
Bill's had a long week.
Yeah, I wanted to. I forgot to mention the owner of the Donatello piece. I felt weird saying rabbit ferret. But
He's a well-known collector. Yeah.
Yes, he is.
fantastic collection. And great pieces, that Venom and that Storm too. I completely agree about the rain. You see some people, they just know how to do it, and sometimes it just looks like scratches on the page. Beautiful piece.
All right, Jill, you get to take over the final topic of the evening.
Yeah, last but not least. So we do listen to the comments. We do listen to the feedback that you guys leave. And so the topic that I chose tonight was definitely one that was suggested by a commenter on the last collector conversation. So somebody wanted to talk about blue line controversy. So here we go. We're going to tackle it. So little professor moment for you. Dino's truly the professor. I think I'm just the TA. But, I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'm not going to go widely into the history of comics. Sorry, Marcus, no fireworks, but, maybe controversy can be its own proverbial fireworks. So when you're creating a comic, let's just kind of go back to square one. So writer writes, penciler gets what the writer says, pencils out usually in rough, sometimes in thumbnails, sometimes in roughs on an actual 11 by 17 page. It kind of depends on, who the artist is, who the writer is. Do they have a previous relationship? Which publisher they're working with? Do they have a history with that publisher? So on and so forth. But in general, writer, penciler, inker, then colorist and letterer. And those can be the same person. They can be individual people. You might have 6 different people touch a book before it goes to getting to be published. So kind of bringing it back here, being a little elementary, because I'm going to talk some about the process of where blue lines fit into that process. So I wanted to kind of give a little overview there. So when we talk about blue lines, there's actually 2 different ways that you can talk about blue lines. So the first way, which I like to talk about, and I actually have a visual aid, it's a blue line piece that I have in my own collection, so I'm not, dogging on anybody for having a blue line piece except myself. And so what this is an artist that has actually done the art in a blue pencil and makes blue lines. So I don't know if you've got that piece, Bill, or if you're having some issues, but artists that do this kind of work are like Sal Buscema does this a lot. Alan Davis does this a lot. Frank Whiteley does this a lot, where they actually complete the art and it is in blue pencil. My example in my CAF gallery is a Todd Aaron Smith, and it was a $40 piece. He was an animator on Batman the Animated Series. Had to have something from him because I love that series. Doesn't write. So that is the first way that you can talk about blue lines. The second way you can talk about blue lines is if in the process, the penciler, instead of putting it actually on a piece of paper, they can do it digitally. Are you showing a blue pencil, George? You giving me a visual aid.
Show the difference. We got the blue pencil versus digital. Yeah.
Yeah. So the other way that you can talk about blue lines is when it's done digitally. And there's lots of reasons now why artists choose to work in blue line. Just think with modern technology, you can, create something in Procreate, or you can do it in, looks like we lost Bill. You can do things in a bunch of different creative programs. Photoshop, you can also do blue lines. And then Procreate are probably the 2 that are most frequent. So what that penciler is doing is that they're drawing in these programs and drawing with the blue line. The reason why they're using the blue line and blue line gets used is because it's non-photo blue, which means when the piece gets scanned and you're getting the final piece, those blue lines don't actually end up on the finished piece. So it's a way now that a penciler or, someone that's using the blue line can lay out the piece, make changes digitally, maybe change a pose here, firm up some lines there, work with the editor and the writer to see if they need to make some changes to the art. And they do this for a lot of reasons. 1, it's a lot less expensive because you're doing it digitally. 2, you don't have to actually have the piece of paper that you're trying to put in the mail. We all know what's going on in the mail these days. So you face damage. You're facing shipping delays, all kinds of stuff that can happen. So modern artists now, a lot of them are doing blue lines digitally, sending it over to the inker, especially if that inker is a different person. They can print out that blue line and then ink directly over it. So the controversy is that where the creative process is a little bit different between the penciler and the inker. So if the penciler has a pencil, like a blue line pencil copy of it, now they have a physical copy of the page. But when it goes over to the inker and the inker prints out the blue line and they're inking on top of it, now that's a sister copy of the page, if you will. So what some of the controversy is, oh, there you go. There's the blue line piece I was talking about, the Todd Aaron Smith, and this was all done completely in blue line. So that's the first method we were talking about. But a lot of the controversy is in that second method where the blue line is done digitally, printed out, and then inked directly over. So what really also the issue is that sometimes when people are selling art, they're selling a digital blue line with ink. And unless you're a savvy collector and don't realize, okay, this is a digital blue line, you might be thinking you're getting art that you're not actually getting. So dependent upon what is important to you and dependent upon, Jason, I'm not speaking from recent experience, and depending on, what's going on with that particular artist, there could be another set out there of that piece that's the pencil, and then a different page that is the ink.
So you should clarify, right? If you ask them, if you see blue lines, ask them to clarify, is that art or is that what, print? Is that a printed line? So when you see a scan, let's say on Heritage, and you see pencils or ink, you see an ink piece, but you see some blue lines sneaking out sometimes, behind the inside. Is there any way to tell those are ink or print lines?
So a lot of times people say that the actual physical blue pencil feels a little bit tackier. So it's going to feel tacky compared to one that's printed on the page. But whoever is selling it to you should be honest about it. And if you ask that, you can't
tell just by looking at the scan.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at a digital scan online and you're not actually looking at the piece, it's going to be very difficult to discern that, which is why I think there's a lot of controversy about it.
I found most inkers will erase the pencil. So usually if I see blue lines, I assume it's digital in most cases, but that's not a hard rule by any means.
And it's good to point out for everyone that the reason why it originated as blue lines is those don't photocopy. So an artist can actually originally can draw in a blue pencil all they want, and then they can go over and ink over what they want, but whatever's drawn in blue won't photocopy. But you end up using that in the digital age is now the kind of, they just create a print of the pencils in blue and then let them ink that. So it's still blue, but it's not the same as blue pencils before.
Right. And sometimes this is all the same artist doing it. So the digital blue line is the only copy with their own inks over it. Sometimes that is the only original. Where the rub is I think if it's a different artist that does the pencil versus doing the inks, and it's over a digital blue line. So, it's kind of it's an interesting topic to talk about, but I just want to make sure that, folks don't end up in a situation where they think it's actual pencil blue line, and that turns out not to be the case. It's digital.
Yeah, and I've found there's probably more artists printing blue line, laying it out digitally, printing it, and then inking it traditionally than you maybe think about. But I know there's a ton of artists where the ink is the only true original in existence. So I personally, in that instance, I love it. It's still the only original. It is the published art, where it doesn't bother me that it was done digitally at one of the stages.
And I think the natural follow-on to this is also how it's sold, and whether it's kept together or apart, whether it's blue line or the way Felix does it, where with Ryan Stegman and JP Mayer, you get both pieces together, and then what happens after that? Do they stay together? Do they get split up? I think it's kind of related to all that in terms of the authenticity of the piece and who's done what. And And I was mentioning in the chat, there's also two artists, again, that I know from Felix, Riley Rossmo and Nick Darrington, who work with a physical blue pencil and kind of make it their own process as well. And I love seeing that on the page. So it's very varied how this process goes. Jenny Frisian is another artist who has a very interesting process where she's doing all the work, but she's developed a partially digital, partially physical process to help make the work go faster. And it's worth knowing how she's doing it, because when Cadence sells her work, you know, you are also getting both pieces, but sometimes there's only one piece, sometimes there's two. You really have to look into what you're buying and how that artist works. I remember my third year of collecting, I would write to artists on Instagram, and your first question almost had to be, is the work traditional or digital?
Yeah.
Especially with a digital painting, you know, it can really be hard to sometimes tell. It's a very faceted subject.
And to that point, I think what you're saying, Mikhail, is a lot of it is, to me, it's part of the story sometimes. It's like, why did they do blue lines? And to your point that I think everyone's kind of making is deadlines. It's quicker to just send someone a digital file to print out. So in a lot of cases, I feel like that's happening more and more. Or people are just doing the pencils completely digitally. I have some of the McNiven, Death of Wolverine story, where McNiven did the entire story digitally, except for some certain panels that he drew. And then Leaston did all the inks. Wow. And it's all blue line ink. But I didn't have a problem with that because it's the true original.
Right. Well, the other, Nick Bradshaw works in red instead of blue. I mean, there's enough variability out there that you kind of have to really ask the questions and delve into what you're getting. And the other reason that I didn't mention before, for the reason why folks tend to do blue line a little bit more these days, is also because if there's a penciler and they keep on making changes to the page, sometimes you lose the integrity of the page. If there is a lot of erasing going on and a lot of changing, sometimes the paper no longer takes ink in a way that an inker would find satisfactory. So that's just another angle for why I think there's some more blue line going on.
Right, and I fixed my internet, by the way. The network cable was just far enough out because I had taken my laptop into the mini golf the other day. So my fault. So everything's good now. But yeah, my opinions, I don't have a problem with blue lines. Honestly, I think that if that's what goes into that particular process to make that book, then that's what you get. I mean, I love Paulo Rivera and his work with his father inking it. And I don't mind getting two pieces for those because in a way I really enjoy seeing the pencil piece and the inked work that his father does. So, but I can say that that should be like your number one question, certainly when you're looking at artwork on eBay to purchase or that you're going to be bidding on. Ask ahead to make sure that you're really getting what you want to be getting out of it. I mean, a very common question that a lot of buyers or potential buyers will make on eBay will just be to ask that question up front. Is it original? You know, is it a blue line? Because so many sellers will omit that in their descriptions on eBay that you really have to protect yourself if that's a concern for you.
Mm-hmm. Or the description nowadays that I've been seeing a lot is original art print.
I think that's a whole nother topic. But
production art.
Production print, one of one, or ILO. You see ILO too.
Yeah, I mean, it's just clickbait. I mean, you see the price and you're like, obviously, there's something wrong. But like, I hate that it even draws my eye.
Right, mono prints, and and all that kind of stems back down to, I think that the artist relationship with the publishers. They have the right to sell one original. Technically, I think is written into most agreements. So whether it's original or not, so that's how the monoprint has come into existence for people who work strictly digital, because they're allowed to sell that one. So, unless they're given permission to make prints and stuff, but typically they don't have that flexibility in their contracts. That's a different topic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that is a different. And I wasn't down on monoprints. I was just saying, like I've been seeing all these Silver Age covers, and it's always titled "Original Art Print."
Right.
Or acetate.
Yeah. So.
But looking at the chat, I don't know that there's controversy necessarily with blue lines themselves. I think it's more around knowing what you're buying and knowing if it's a blue line pencil or if it's blue line printed digitally, or if it's omitted altogether and they don't tell you what it is.
That's right. And be proactive about asking questions. You know, what are you selling? What is this? Is there is this blue line print or pencils, etc.? That way you know what you're looking at, as opposed to assuming, which gets us all in trouble.
And the other thing to note is do the research on the artist. Does this artist
process.
work in pencil and then do ink, or or the combination of artists? If there was a different penciler versus inker, there was a question in the chat about what do you consider original, and unfortunately, the answer is it depends on the piece. Yeah. Is there an actual pencil piece in existence versus the inked piece? Which one do you value more as a collector? Which one you visually prefer over the other?
Which could be different from another collector, right? They could one wants the pencil, the other wants the ink.
Yeah, the blue line ink may be the only one in existence if the blue line is the digital. So honestly, it depends on every piece, which is what makes it difficult.
Right.
I mean, I know that Sean Phillips works that way too. I mean, where he similar to the way Liefeld works, where he does his work digitally, enlarges it as a blue line on the board, and then inks directly on that. So it's all Sean, but it's just their process and everything. And as long as you know what you're buying, you should be happy.
It is crazy that every other industry in our economy, we kind of praise people to leverage technology and get more efficient and embrace digital technology. But in art, when they're starting to get into these blue lines and digital artistry, away from the traditional techniques, we all cringe and say, "Oh, this disrupts our what we know," and and that makes it harder for us as collectors. So
while complaining that the books aren't coming out fast enough,
or they cost too much.
That's right. They cost too much
for sure.
And I do feel for artists that work digitally, they've honed their craft. There's some artists who really go the extra mile to wrench every emotion out of a digital creation, and that's fantastic. And I don't blame them for, I'm not going to get into anything beyond this, but I don't blame them for wanting to monetize what they see their compatriots doing. They're doing work. And again, my brother is a digital artist and does work that he should get credited for. And I wish, I hope that he could get it out more easily. So it's an interesting topic for sure.
And I think also remember, over the next over 10 years, you're going to have artists that began digitally. Like a lot of these artists that we cherish and we have in our hobby, they started doodling on paper and it gravitated to them drawing comics. But the next generation of artists may have done only digital when they were growing up, trying to draw their characters on an iPad or something. So they're just more inclined to use digital.
Or look at Adam Kubert. He went traditional to digital, back to traditional in some cases. There's a way to mix it up. Mitch Gerrards, I think, did that a little bit too. After Mr. Miracle was all digital, then at least we did see some physical work with Strange Adventures. So
which goes back to what Jill said. Learn about the artist and how they do it. Talk to them at conventions and ask, what's your process? That way you understand and can better make decisions on their art.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an interview with every single artist out there on the internet somewhere. So if you really want to go the extra mile. So then I stopped writing to artists and saying, is it traditional or original? And I'd check them out and be like, what is your process? And then I'd have a better sense of like, all right, this artist only works digitally. Yeah, I'm not going to bother them with it. Or this artist, doesn't mix. So,
Jill, when you buy commissions, does it matter whether they're digital or they do traditional pen and paper?
I don't tend to get any digital commissions, just to be honest with you. I mean, they do exist. They are out there, but I'm at the point in my collecting career that I want the actual pencil and ink on paper and color or whatever their Copic, whatever it is. I memean, during COVID, there were a lot of artists that were providing digital commissions as kind of a sideline to what they want to do. But for me, I just need that sheet of paper. So the folks that are all digital and creating in digital, I'm like, y'all, it's just not my preferred thing to collect.
And Kadena and Jill, your point earlier about opportunity cost, I always tell my wife, like, everything is a trade-off. And I feel like a lot of artists, that's the trade-off, right? If you're working digitally, you'll be able to work faster. You can hit more deadlines. You can make more page rate money, and more money off jobs. But the trade-off is you're not able to sell Jill a commission.
Yeah.
Or myself, I don't really, unless it's color work, I don't really feel a desire to buy a digital commission.
Yeah. I mean, you store it on your computer. It's great. It's nice to look at, but it's not the same as, you know, it's not the same. Yeah.
I don't have any digital commissions or work either, but I did recently support a Patreon where the reward tier is a digital commission. So, you know, but just because I like the artist's work and that's how they work. So.
Yeah.
You'll have to report back how you do that.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Well, I did wrangle a physical work out of it.
Well, you're a
Right.
I can say that I supported the Patreon without knowing that I could do that because I want to see what they do. You know, I want them to have the ability to fund that work and see where it goes.
I honestly, I ran into this probably, gosh, it must have been like 10 years ago. I bought I don't even know how I got it, but it was an X-Men cover. It was a Zorn image, and I got the work, and it was shipped in a tube, and it was original. It was just like this little pencil outline of the character, but they shipped the print with it. It was a digital art, and I didn't really know what I was getting. I'm gonna have to dig it out because I was so disappointed in it. It really didn't cost hardly anything. I'll be honest with you. To own the original cover to this X-Men book, you know, cost me like $60. But I really didn't know from the scan what the size was, and it really was. I think it was only like 8 by 10. It was just a rough layout of the character, and then the digital print. But yeah, I've never put it in a portfolio. I think I left it in the tube in my closet. I've never taken it out from the day I brought it home. So yeah, that I'll have to unearth that. That would be fun to take a look at after all this time.
Definitely.
Time to take it out of the tube. It needs to be
yeah.
Let it breathe, Will.
I'm just trying to think where exactly in the closet it is right now. So
10 years from now, he'll open it up, and there's going to be an original sketch on the back. You know, dear Bill, thanks for your interest. Hope you enjoy this.
I picked it up at San Diego, and I remember the artist was so could see the disappointment on my face, and so they gave me like 2 or 3 other prints of other cover work they had done. Of course, it didn't do anything for me because that's not what I wanted. I wanted something. I was expecting it to be 11 by 17 and flat, and here it's rolled in a tube, and yeah. All right. So Dino, we have some artwork to look at before we end tonight's broadcast.
Sounds good.
All righty, let's get this first one up here.
So this one's in the collection of John Calise, and hopefully he's on this thing so he can learn a little bit about the piece. This is Superman versus Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, page 55. This came out in 1976. Obviously a collaboration between Marvel and DC. At the time, they were going through a war, and who could ever imagine them collaborating? I can remember it's almost like the U.S. and the USSR were to come together in partnership. But they recognized that there was a lot of interest in having the 2 biggest characters, Superman and Spider-Man, kind of come in and be in a book together. So in 1976, they published this, and the joke at the time was, hey, what continuity does Superman ever battle Spider-Man? And the answer is Earth $. But this was a book that was produced, you know, and if you read the story, it's about 70 pages. The first part of it was basically Clark Kent and Peter Parker getting together. They're both news reporters, and they meet at a conference, and something happens where Doc Ock and Lex Luthor get together, and they have to be, you know, to be able to fight them. Superman and Spider-Man actually battle themselves and then team up finally to battle the enemies. But you have this middle sequence where it's just a slugfest between Superman and Spider-Man. And this is a great example of, I think, the second page in that battle story where they battle. And the both sides, Marvel and DC, really agreed no one can lose, and you can't damage Metropolis or, you know, the characters. So it was just an amazing fight sequence where these two go at it together. This is actually, I don't think John knows what he has here. First of all, he's calling it Superman versus Spider-Man, which is actually the follow-up that happened in 1978. The 76 was titled Superman versus Amazing Spider-Man, because that was the original title, and unfortunately DC couldn't have a pronoun, a adjective for Superman. He was just Superman. But this came out, and it was drawn by Ross Andrew and Dick Giordano. But what's interesting is, since the publishing and the distribution went through DC, they got final cut, and they got Neil Adams, believe it or not, to kind of try to make Superman look as good as possible. So anytime you see a page from the 76 issue, you know that any white touch-ups on Superman is done by Neil Adams. So you can see this page had three panels with Superman, and they have whiteout on it. And that suggests to me, again, we don't know the answer, but it suggests that Neil had looked at that and made some corrections. Whether he did it in whiteout and ink or we don't know, but he did have final say on what Superman was going to look like, because DC wanted to have a better looking hero than their Marvel counterpart. So I chose this page because of the just remarkable history behind it. This is a great fight sequence. You can see just Spider-Man just kicking Superman. I thought that was just tremendous. But again, he doesn't list, John doesn't list an artist. He doesn't list, the actual title is actually Superman versus Amazing Spider-Man, the 76 version, not the 78. He may not know what he has, but hopefully if he doesn't tune in, maybe somebody who maybe can connect with him can give him some more information about this great page.
That's too cool.
You can message him, Dino.
Maybe I'll offer to buy it first, and then
There you go.
I'm just kidding. But great page, John. Really thankful for you sharing it on CAF.
John's personal value may not be as high as yours.
That's right. That's right.
I think it's fantastic to learn something about a piece that you may have, and sometimes it's hard to track down information about a piece, or know where it came from or what it even was.
And that's why learning about the hobby. And I would recommend this book called Slugfest: Marvel versus DC. Talks about this whole period of war between the two sides, and how they tried to create a hobby, an industry together. But there was Neil Adams going from DC to Marvel, and Jack Kirby going from Marvel to DC. It was a war between the two that really was fascinating to read about. So
I love that, and Bill, I got to call you out again. This has been one of the awesome things about this website is, over the years I've had other collectors jump in and say, this, did you know this was used in an advertisement or a trading card or something like that? So it's awesome.
Good. Yeah, I love talking about pieces that just show up, and it just strikes my eye. And I love this. Before I actually reached out to Fred Chamberlain and bought a piece. He had a commission of Superman versus Spider-Man by Ariel Olivetti, and we came to a deal so I could buy the piece. I wanted to do that before this show, so he wouldn't know how excited I am about that book. But thank you, Fred, and hope you're enjoying. But no, again, this just showed up. I thought it would be good to share with everyone today.
All right. Here is your other artwork.
So second piece, this is a DC Special Series number 11 piece. Artist is Alex Savok, who I've known him for a lot of his Marvel art, but so very unusual to see something on the DC side. But this is late 70s. This is in the collection of Steve Criozeri, who's a great collection. He has the Chuck Norris cover that everyone knows. But what I like about this page is you have the three Flashes. You have Barry Allen, Wally West, and Jay Garrett, and they're about to battle Grog, the big gorilla villain. And in the middle panel, can you imagine Alex getting the script, and the script says, okay, you have these three Flashes, and they're going to all merge together, and then they're going to tag Grog as one hero. And you could think of Alex reading that, and his first three words in his mind, well, the first two are "what the." But he's thinking, how do I draw that? So what he does in this middle panel, I think, is just fascinating. So he basically has them merge, and the statement is, it says, I love the quote, but in theory it makes sense. And that's the beauty of comics. It can make sense, and it doesn't have to make any real, physics sense. It just has to resonate with the reader. But you can see how he drew it. There's certain characteristics about the hat and the costumes that they all come together into one Flash. So three Flashes into one. And well, the physicist in me says there's three things wrong with that. One is atoms don't merge. Like if I bake a cake, my flour and my sugar don't actually merge. They actually mix and get closer together, and they mix. They don't really merge. The second is, what happens to all the shoes and the costumes? How come there's no two pairs of shoes and two extra costumes being flung out of this merged flashes? And three is, if you know force equals mass times acceleration, it's linear. It's not exponential, which means they would have had just the same impact hitting Grog 3 separately than they would be coming together. But all that doesn't make sense. It doesn't need to. This is comics. So what Alex did, I think, was create something that's very intriguing for a reader, and it's very scientific without being too kind of picky about what actually works in the national world. But you can see as a reader 3 flashes merging together and walloping Grog with a super punch. And I thought that was just I love seeing that. I think it gets to the whole world of comics being its own, having its own natural element and laws of gravity and things in the world that only readers and us can appreciate. So anyway, I thought this was a nice page. I like flash pages that have like Nick does, that have multiple flashes. And this one you get like 9 different flash drawings on one page, because when you show them speeding and running, you get to draw them in different area in different as he's running in different figures. So that's great. And it's a super page, and we're really happy Steve posted it. I
mean, it's comics, right? You got to have some willing suspension of disbelief, That's
the whole point, right? Yeah. I mean, it's so funny because you'll see collectors, they're talking about, how can Spider-Man do his web and Superman fly? But then you kind of have to think, we're talking superheroes. You're talking about something very specific, but the whole world itself is make-believe. So there's a book called The Physics of Superheroes. It actually goes through about 24 different scenarios on what's in comics and how does that compare to real life science. And for those are interested in a good read, it'll explain a lot of the mysteries behind kind of the phenomena behind superheroes and what they do, how they fly, and how they're invulnerable and things like that. So
anyway. There have been shows about Batman's tech too. Just
that's
what
right.
The Batman's tech are feasible, which ones we're getting there. Like, okay, this is something that could happen, and someone with a ton of money and an R&D department all on his own could make happen, and the stuff that's just
And I remember reading about Jack Kirby, and he was doing these comics, and Stan Lee. They would read about science, but they would try to imbue their comics with enough of a flavor for science that it makes the reader feel like they're getting some
you just need a toe in the water, right?
You go right. Everything else can be a stretch. I totally agree.
And that's a good storytelling just comes from a very simple truth and then just takes you somewhere new. And I think that's what we all like about the comics, and why we just willingly accept these stories. I have more trouble with retcons than I do with something that's happening in a particular story.
And
DC also did a book called The Anatomy of a Superhero, which is Batman's notes on all his compatriots. It's pretty cool.
Oh, wow.
And on the art side of that page, I am a sucker for art that breaks the panels. That had some great moments in there.
Absolutely.
And that was a great page, Dino, by the way. I'm a huge Flash fan, and that really just balanced so nicely and had all those elements.
And has all 3 flashes, so you have all 3 of them in one page. Can't beat that. But
good selection, and we got educated again, Dino. Thank you so much.
Glad to help.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna put this college credit on my resume.
You can sign our slips, Dino, so we can get the credit after.
That's right.
Wow. Well, so again, a fantastic episode, and I will let everybody know what I'm thinking about by Wednesday as far as doing the next show Sunday. But just give me a few days to sort of work through a couple things on Monday, Tuesday, just so I can see how I feel. But I might want Sunday evening off next week, but hopefully not. So, but again, everybody, it's fantastic to Dino and Jill again. This is 3 shows in a row. You bring it every time. George, Mikhail, great first episodes for you both.
We're really excited to have them both on. I know Jill and I were talking. We couldn't have asked for two better folks and to join us, but great to have them on.
It's always fun. I always love to see the art that people pick, because it's not necessarily my taste, but I learn and I get to expose to other pieces, and I'm always happy to do that.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, thank you for having me. It was really an honor, a pleasure. I really enjoy discussing these topics and learning about all these different facets. There's so much going on. There's so many ways to approach this hobby. It's interesting to get into it.
Very true. And you taught us something new about StreamYard tonight on how to use multiple cameras. So that was the first
No doubt.
for us here too. In a year, I've been doing this a year. I've never done that. So very cool. And yes, everybody, Mikhail will be on our amateur dueling dealers show tomorrow evening, going against. Yes, you are. And he is loaded for bear with the memes. Wow. I can tell you that. And Jason has made several good ones himself. So, and I even stepped in and helped Jason with some effects today. I actually did one for Mikhail too. But so yeah, I'm trying to help up their game a little bit. So it should be fun tomorrow night. So I hope everybody can tune in to see how that goes. It'll be. I'm going to enjoy it. I know for certain.
I'll have the popcorn going. I'm sure ML and Jason will rock it. So.
Exactly. All right. Well, again, thank you everybody for tuning in. We had a really great turnout this evening, over 100 people watching us for the majority of the show, and I really appreciate that. And we'll see you tomorrow night or some other time this week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Have a good night.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for sharing.